When I was about 8 years old, shoveling snow on a bitterly cold day in Antarctica, I used to imagine what it would be like to be instantly transported to the surface of the sun for just a nanosecond and then brought back. I thought it might be just enough time to warm me up without causing any harm. But would such an idea really work, or would even a nanosecond on the sun be too much for the human body to handle? Believe it or not, this wouldn't even be enough to warm you up. The surface temperature of the sun is around 5,800 Kelvin, give or take. If you stayed there for any amount of time, you'd be instantly incinerated. But a nanosecond is incredibly short, yet it's long enough for light to travel roughly a foot. Assuming you're facing the sun, it's hard to avoid looking directly at it, especially when it fills up 180 degrees of your view. Normally, you should avoid staring at the sun, but in this case, it's nearly impossible. In that nanosecond, approximately 1 microjoule of energy would enter your eye. A microjoule of light is not much. It's the amount you'd absorb if you stared at a computer monitor with your eyes closed. And then, if you open and shut them quickly, your eye will take in about as much light from the screen during that reverse blink as it would in a nanosecond on the surface of the sun, if there's even a word for that. For that, like a blink but in reverse, I feel like there should be a word for it. Anyway, during the nanosecond on the sun, photons from the sun would pour into your eye, bombarding your retinal cells. Then, as the nanosecond ended and you jumped back home, your retinal cells wouldn't have even started reacting yet. Over the next few million nanoseconds, or milliseconds, those cells, now saturated with light energy, would spring into action, signaling your brain that something had happened. You'd spend just 1 nanosecond on the sun, but it would take 30 million nanoseconds for your brain to process it from your perspective. All you'd notice was a flash. The flash would feel like it lasted much longer than your brief time on the sun, only fading as your retinal cells finally settled down. The energy absorbed by your skin would be negligible, about 10 to the power of -5 joules per square centimeter of exposed skin. For context, according to the IEEE P1584 standard, holding your finger in the blue flame of a butane lighter for 1 second delivers around 5 joules per square centimeter, enough to cause a second-degree burn. The heat during your sun visit would be 5 orders of magnitude weaker. Aside from a brief flash in your eyes, you'd hardly notice. But what if you miscalculated the coordinates? The sun's surface is relatively cool, hotter than, say, Phoenix, but downright chilly compared to its interior. While the surface burns at a few thousand degrees, the core reaches several million degrees. But what if you spent a nanosecond inside the sun? The Stefan-Boltzmann law allows us to calculate how much heat you'd absorb inside the sun, and the results are grim. You would exceed the IEEE P1584b threshold for second-degree burns after just 1 femtosecond. A nanosecond, the duration of your stay, is a staggering 1 million femtoseconds. This does not end well for you. Now, for some good news, deep inside the sun, energy is carried by photons with very short wavelengths, mostly hard and soft X-rays, not visible light. These penetrate deep into your body, heating your internal organs and ionizing your DNA, causing irreversible damage before they even start to burn you. In hindsight, calling that good news was a mistake. Don't spend a nanosecond inside the sun. In Greek legend, Icarus flew too close to the sun, and the heat melted his wings, causing him to fall to his death. While it's true that temperature increases closer to the sun, temperature and heat are not the same thing. Melting, or any phase change, requires the absorption of a specific amount of heat energy per kilogram, which depends on both temperature and duration of exposure. This brings us back to Icarus. His wings didn't melt simply because he got too close to the sun. They melted because he stayed there too long. If he had made short, controlled visits instead of lingering, he might have survived. Visit briefly in small hops, and you can go anywhere.